The resonance chamber of the Glyptal Imperium was a monument to order, a construct of pure, light-hungry crystal grown over millennia in the heart of their throne world. Starlight from Xylos, their sacred, slumbering giant, filtered through the vaulted ceiling, refracting into 1,000 shimmering spectra that danced upon the polished obsidian floor. The air itself hummed with a low, resonant frequency, the collective psychic and physical signature of the Praetor and his council, a sound that had been the bedrock of galactic stability for ages uncounted. But today, the resonance was discordant, a harmony fractured by a single, silent note of profound uncertainty. It had a shape, this silence. It was a vessel, a lone, black ship that had appeared without warning in high orbit over their most revered star. It did not answer hails. It did not emit any recognizable energy signature. It simply hung there, a sliver of absolute nothingness against the glorious blaze of Xylos, a void in the perfect tapestry of the cosmos. Praetor Valerius, his ancient crystalline carapace a deep, contemplative sapphire, stood motionless at the center of the chamber. The light of his being, a soft, internal luminescence that bespoke his age and authority, pulsed in slow, measured waves. His thoughts, like his physical form, were structures of immense patience, but even he felt the strain of this unprecedented anomaly. For cycles, the ship had remained. It was an insult, a challenge, a question mark etched into the heart of their dominion. The Imperium's power was absolute, a network of fleets and worlds bound by the immutable logic of the stars, a philosophy of predictable force and unwavering order. This ship, this single, solitary vessel, obeyed no logic they could discern. "It mocks us," came the sharp, percussive chime of Archon Kale's voice. His own carapace, a fiery crimson faceted like a shard of volcanic glass, flared with agitated light. He was the master of the Glyptal fleets, a being forged in the crucible of stellar conquest, and inaction was a poison to his very essence. A lone scout, a derelict, or an act of such profound arrogance that it can only be answered with annihilation. It sits above our cradle, a blasphemy in the gaze of our founding star. We have extended every courtesy. We have broadcasted in every known tongue, every mathematical constant. We are met with nothing but contemptuous silence. He gestured with a sharply articulated limb towards the vast holographic display that dominated one wall of the chamber. There it was, the intruder, rendered in stark relief. It was not a grand or imposing design. It was sleek minimalist, a blade of solidified night. Scans slid off its hull like water from polished stone. Gravimetric, electromagnetic, psychic, all probes returned nothing, as if the ship were not there at all but was merely a hole in reality itself. This was the source of their deepest fear. It was not the threat of a weapon, it was the terror of the unknown. "Arrogance is a possibility, Archon," Vexia's voice resonated, a soft, emerald hum that soothed the chamber's growing agitation. She was the Imperium's chief xenologist and diplomat, her form more slender, her internal light a complex, shifting pattern of intellectual curiosity. But it is not the only one. Consider its construction. It absorbs nearly all energy directed at it. It has no visible propulsion, no weapon emplacements, no viewports. It is less a ship and more a statement, a piece of sculpture placed deliberately in our most sacred space. To assume malice is to project our own nature onto a canvas that is, as of now, entirely blank. Kale's crimson light intensified. A blank canvas that violates our sovereign territory, a statement that must be met with a statement of our own. The Grand Fleet is ready. We can excise this sculpture from our sky and be done with this charade. Valerius finally shifted, the movement sending deep, resonant tones through the chamber floor. The other council members fell silent, their own internal lights dimming in deference. "And what if that is the reaction it seeks, Archon?" The Praetor's voice was like the grinding of tectonic plates, slow but immensely powerful. "What if this is a test, a lure? We have consolidated this arm of the galaxy through strength, yes, but also through wisdom. We have never encountered a civilization capable of this level of stealth, of this perfect silence. To respond with blind force is to admit we have no other tool at our disposal. It is the response of a lesser being, a beast that knows only the logic of the claw." He turned his ancient gaze towards Vexia. "You have analyzed the scant data we possess, the vessel's trajectory before it stopped. Is there anything?" Vexia's emerald light pulsed with concentration. "Only anomalies, Praetor. Its vector of arrival does not correspond to any known hyperlane or stable wormhole. It appeared from what our astronomers call the Whispering Void, a region between galactic arms thought to be empty. It did not decelerate in any conventional manner. One moment the space was empty. The next, the vessel was there in a perfectly stable geostationary orbit. The energy required for such a maneuver is theoretically impossible. It would have torn a hole in spacetime, yet our instruments registered nothing but the faintest gravitational ripple, like a stone dropped into a pond from an impossible height. The chamber fell into a heavy silence again, the weight of her words settling upon them. This was not a scout from a rival power. The known empires, for all their might, still played by the same fundamental rules of physics. Their ships tore through hyperspace, leaving tumultuous wakes. Their engines burned with the fury of captured stars. Their weapons announced themselves with floods of energy. This was something else, something alien in the truest, most terrifying sense of the word. A test, Valerius repeated, his sapphire light deepening. He looked back at the image of the ship. A test of our temperament, our wisdom, our restraint. Or a test of our defenses, Kale countered, his voice a low growl of resonant crystal. They probe us seeking weakness. They place a single, seemingly insignificant piece on the board to see how the masters of the game will react. Do we ignore it and show weakness? Do we overreact and show aggression? It is a classic gambit. The correct response is to remove the piece from the board with such overwhelming and precise force that they dare not place another. Your logic is sound, Archon, if we assume we are playing the same game, Vexia replied. But what if this is not a game of conquest? What if it is a first contact protocol so advanced, so utterly alien that we are failing to recognize it for what it is? Silence can be a form of communication. It can mean, we are here, we are not a threat. We are waiting for you to demonstrate the same. By sending your fleet, you may be giving them the very answer they do not wish to hear. The debate continued for what felt like an eternity, a clash of philosophies that had defined the Glyptal Imperium for generations. The way of the warrior versus the way of the scholar. The logic of the sword versus the logic of the open hand. But beneath it all was a current of genuine, primal fear. The Glyptal had not known fear for eons. They were the apex, the final word in a galaxy they had methodically and patiently brought to order. This silent ship had reintroduced the concept to their ancient psyche. It was a ghost at their imperial feast, a reminder that the universe was infinitely larger and more mysterious than even their vast knowledge could encompass. Finally, Praetor Valerius raised a hand, his internal light pulsing a brilliant, decisive blue. The chamber's resonance fell into perfect, expectant harmony. We will not be goaded into blind aggression, nor will we sit idle while our sovereignty is questioned. We will respond, but our response will be a question, not an answer. He turned his gaze to Archon Kale. You will assemble a fleet, not the grand fleet, Archon, a greeting force, a diplomatic escort. Its purpose will not be to destroy, but to contain. To surround this vessel and demonstrate our capability without exercising it. You will issue one final hail, a declaration of our peaceful intent and a firm request that they identify themselves. If they remain silent, you will hold your position. You will show them the face of Glyptal power, but you will also show them the discipline that guides it. Kale's crimson light dimmed slightly, a grudging acceptance. It was not the decisive strike he craved, but it was action. He bowed his head, a gesture of sharp, crystalline grace. As you command, Praetor, they will see our strength. Valerius's gaze then shifted to Vexia. And you, Xenologist, will accompany the Archon. You will be the voice of this Imperium. Should they choose to speak, you will be the one to hear them. You will be our wisdom, tempering our strength. Vexia's emerald form shimmered. I understand, Praetor, I will be ready. The decision was made. A fleet of immense power would be dispatched to the silent visitor. It was a compromise, a carefully calibrated move in a game whose rules they did not understand. As the council members dispersed, their resonant hums carrying their anxieties and resolutions out into the crystalline city, Praetor Valerius remained alone in the great chamber. He stared at the image of the black ship, a hole in his perfect reality. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the chamber, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a young shard, staring into the deep, starless voids for the first time. It was the feeling of being small, of standing on the shore of a vast, dark ocean and seeing a single, impossible sail appear on the horizon. The name of the species that had built this vessel was Uncan. Owned to them, but the Glyptal had assigned it a designation based on its point of origin, a distant, unremarkable yellow star in the so-called Whispering Void. They called them humans. The fleet that translated from hyperspace into the Xylos system was a sight of breathtaking power and artistry. It was not a brutish collection of gunmetal gray warships, but a celestial armada of golden, crystalline vessels. Each ship was a unique, sculpted creation, seeming to have been grown rather than built, their forms echoing the sacred geometries of Glyptal philosophy. They moved with a silent, synchronized grace, their crystalline hulls catching the light of the great star and scattering it in brilliant, fiery shards. At their head was the immutable logic asterisk, Archon Kale's flagship, a vessel whose size dwarfed all others, its prow shaped like the mandible of some ancient, cosmic predator. It was a fleet designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure, a perfect embodiment of the Imperium's might. And all of it, this entire constellation of force, was directed at the single, silent black ship that hadn't moved an inch. Aboard the immutable logic asterisk, the command bridge was a cavern of living crystal, humming with the controlled energy of the ship's core. Archon Kale stood upon the command dais, his crimson form radiating impatience. Vexia stood beside him, a stark contrast in her calm emerald luminescence. On the main holographic display, the human ship remained as it always had, a featureless, non-reflective enigma. "All vessels are in position," a subordinate chimed, its voice a crisp, metallic tenor. "We have formed a complete containment sphere. The target has no escape vector." "Escape?" Kale's resonant voice dripped with scorn. "It has done nothing but sit there for half a rotation." "It is a stone, a piece of cosmic debris with an oddly specific shape. I doubt it is even capable of movement. A stone that traversed the interarm void and stopped on a pinprick without any detectable propulsion," Vexia reminded him softly. "Let us not allow its inaction to lull us into underestimation, Archon." Kale gave a short, sharp nod, conceding the point. He would follow the Praetor's orders as much as it chafed his warrior's spirit. "Open a channel, all frequencies." "Vexia, you have the word." Vexia stepped forward, her emerald light brightening as she focused her consciousness. The Glyptal did not speak with vocal cords, but with modulated frequencies, a form of communication far more nuanced and difficult to misinterpret. She projected her thoughts, her identity, her authority into the void. "To the unknown vessel in orbit of Xylos," her transmission began, flowing outward not as sound, but as a wave of pure, structured information. "This is xenologist Vexia of the Glyptal Imperium speaking on behalf of Praetor Valerius. You have entered sovereign Imperium territory. For many cycles, we have respected your silence, assuming it to be a component of your first contact protocol. That period of observation is now at an end. We have surrounded you not as an act of aggression, but as a demonstration of our presence and a formal request for dialogue. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. We await your response." The transmission radiated outward, washing over the black hull of the human ship. The Glyptal fleet waited, their energy cores humming with readiness, their weapon systems charged but dormant. Seconds stretched into minutes. The silence from the human ship remained absolute. Kale's crimson carapace began to pulse with a furious light. "Enough! Their contempt is clear. They will not speak. They will not acknowledge us. They are nothing. Praetor's orders were to demonstrate capability. Let us demonstrate it." He turned to his weapons officer. "Target their foremost edge. A single lance of focused plasma, a warning shot, not to destroy but to scar. Let us see if this sculpture can bleed." "Archon, wait," Vexia protested, her own light flaring with alarm. "Patience. What if their method of communication is simply slower than ours? What if they are debating? To fire now would be an act of irreversible aggression." But Kale's patience was exhausted. "They have had cycles to debate. They have now had our fleet in their presence for long enough to formulate a reply. Their silence is their answer." He gave the final command. "Fire!" The weapons officer, a rigid being of amber crystal, moved to execute the order. The forward emitter of the immutable logic began to glow, gathering a star-hot sphere of plasma in its magnetic containment field. The very space around the flagship began to shimmer with the immense energy being brought to bear. And then everything stopped. It was not a sudden power failure. It was not a counterattack. It was something far more profound, far more unsettling. The glowing plasma in the emitter simply vanished. The shimmering energy field around the ship collapsed into nothing. The hum of the weapon system ceased. On the bridge, every holographic display flickered and then resolved into a single, stark message, written in the elegant, flowing script of the Glyptal high tongue. It was a script no outsider could possibly have known. "We acknowledge you." The message was not broadcast over a communication channel. It simply appeared, imprinted directly onto their systems as if it had been written by a ghost inside their own machines. A collective shiver of disbelief, a discordant psychic wave, passed through the bridge crew. Kale stared, his crimson light frozen in a state of shock. How is that possible? That is a closed system. It is not connected to any external network." Vexia's mind was racing, her emerald light a vortex of frantic calculation. They had not hacked their systems. Hacking implies a breach, a point of entry. This was different. This was like the universe itself had been edited. Before anyone could process the first message, it was replaced by another. "Your intentions are unclear. You speak of peace, but you prepare a weapon. Explain the discrepancy." The simple, logical query struck the bridge with the force of a physical blow. It was not an accusation. It was a calm request for clarification, yet it laid bare the hypocrisy of their actions with devastating precision. They had been caught not in a lie, but in a contradiction of their own stated principles. Vexia found her voice first, her thoughts projecting towards the silent ship with a new sense of desperate respect. We apologize. Our commander grew impatient. It was to be a warning, not a strike of malice, a tool to elicit a response. The text on their screens shifted again. A response was being formulated. Your timescales are rapid. Your actions are precipitous. We will now open a visual channel. Do not perceive the bearer of this message as a threat. She is our voice. A section of the main holographic display dissolved, replaced by an image that stunned the Glyptal into absolute silence. It was not a monstrous warrior or an energy being of terrifying power. It was a creature of soft, fragile-looking organic matter. It was bipedal, with a covering of dark hair pulled back from a pale, smooth face. It was clothed in a simple, dark blue uniform devoid of ornamentation, but it was the creature's eyes that held them captive. They were dark, deep pools of liquid intelligence, and they held a calm that was ancient, profound, and utterly unshakable. It was a calm that felt older and deeper than the stars themselves. "I am Admiral Eva Rostova of the vessel Solitude *," the being said. Her voice was not transmitted through their speakers. Like the text, it simply was. It existed in their minds, perfectly translated, a sound of quiet resonance and measured cadence. "I speak for the collective of humanity." For a long moment, the Glyptal of the command bridge could only stare. This was a human. This small, soft-looking being was the architect of the impossible ship. It seemed absurd. Their own forms were crystalline, enduring, forged in the heat of planetary cores. This creature looked as if a stray micrometeorite could tear it asunder. Archon Kale was the first to recover, his pride warring with his utter confusion. "Admiral Rostova," he began, his resonant tone tight with strained authority. "You have violated the sovereign space of the Glyptal Imperium. You have ignored our hails for cycles. By our law, we have every right to dismantle your ship." The human Rostova did not so much as blink. Her expression remained one of serene neutrality. "We have violated a boundary you have drawn in a space that belongs to no one. We have not ignored your hails. We have been listening. We have been analyzing. We have translated over 70,000 of your distinct linguistic dialects and cross-referenced them with your public historical, philosophical, and mathematical records. We needed to be certain of who we were speaking to before we spoke. We believe in precision. It is the foundation of understanding." Vexia felt a jolt of intellectual shock. 70,000 dialects. That was the entirety of their linguistic history, including dead and ceremonial languages. The sheer analytical power required for such a feat was staggering. They had not been silent, they had been learning. They had been studying the Glyptal with a depth and speed that the Imperium's own scholars would have taken centuries to achieve. You learned our entire culture just by listening?" Vexia asked, her emerald light pulsing with a mixture of awe and terror. "We learned the framework of your communication," Rostova corrected gently. "Your culture is far deeper than its language. It is in your actions, which brings me back to the weapon you were preparing to fire. An action of impatience, of fear, perhaps. You felt that a show of force was a necessary component of this interaction. We do not agree with that philosophy." Kale. As crimson flared, "You are in no position to agree or disagree. You are one ship, we are a fleet. Do not mistake our restraint for weakness. We can extinguish you." Admiral Rostova's gaze remained fixed on the Archon. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable passed through her dark eyes. It was not fear, it was not anger, it might have been pity. "Archon Kale," she said, her voice still impossibly calm. "You believe you are in control of this situation. You believe your fleet gives you power over the Solitude *. You are operating under a misapprehension of the fundamental nature of reality." And with those words, the universe changed. There was no sound, no flash of light, no explosion. It was far more subtle and infinitely more terrifying. Aboard the immutable logic every Glyptal on the bridge suddenly felt heavy. An immense, invisible pressure settled upon them, a gravitational force that made even the slightest movement an act of supreme effort. Alarms began to chime, their tones distorted and drawn out, as if time itself were slowing down. "Report!" Kale bellowed, the sound sluggish and deep in the warped space of the bridge. The amber weapons officer struggled to turn its head, its crystalline structure groaning under the strain. "Archon, all systems failing. The fleet is not responding. All ships, they are." "Frozen?" Vexia looked at the holographic display. Outside, the grand Glyptal fleet was inert. The golden ships hung in space, not dark or damaged, but simply still. Their engine lights were out. Their energy signatures had vanished. They were like insects caught in amber, perfectly preserved in a moment of suspended time. The entire armada of force that could crack planets had been neutralized without a single shot being fired. She looked back at the image of Admiral Rostova, who had not moved. Her expression was the same, a mask of serene, almost mournful calm. "What have you done?" Vexia projected, her thought voice trembling with a terror she had never known. "We have done nothing, xenologist Vexia," Rostova replied. Her voice was the only thing in the universe that seemed to be moving at its normal pace. "We have simply stopped you from doing. We have introduced a localized curvature in spacetime around your fleet. Your ships are not damaged. Your crews are unharmed. You are simply inside a bubble of highly distorted gravity. From your perspective, time has slowed to a near standstill. From our perspective, you are paused." Kale struggled against the invisible force, his crimson light flickering wildly. "This is impossible. The energy required, you would be a star, a black hole." "You are still thinking in terms of energy expenditure," Rostova said, her tone that of a patient teacher explaining a complex equation to a child. "You use energy to fight against the laws of the universe, to push, to burn, to explode. We do not fight the laws, we ask them to bend. The Solitude Asterisk is not a warship, Archon. It is a resonance engine. It finds the fundamental frequency of spacetime and it hums with it. And where we ask it to, the song changes, just for a moment." The sheer, terrifying elegance of it washed over Vexia. They were not a military power. They were something far beyond it. They did not wield weapons. They wielded the universe itself. The Glyptal had brought a fleet of swords to this confrontation, and the humans had met them by changing the very concept of what a sword could do. "The test is complete," Rostova's voice echoed in the silent, heavy space of the bridge. "We came here seeking to understand the other intelligences of this galaxy. We needed to know if you would respond to the unknown with curiosity or with fear, with an open hand or a clenched fist. Your words spoke of peace, but your actions spoke of violence. We have our answer." The crushing gravity field receded as suddenly as it had appeared. The alarms on the bridge returned to their normal pitch before cutting out as systems rebooted. The Glyptal crew slumped, their crystalline forms exhausted from the strain. Kale fell to one knee, his crimson light dimmed to a dull, defeated ember. Outside, the Golden Fleet began to glow again as their systems came back online, their crews no doubt in a state of utter panic and confusion. Vexia stared at the human admiral, her mind reeling with the implications. The power to freeze an entire fleet, the power to rewrite physics on a whim. And they had used it not to destroy, but to make a point, an ethical, philosophical point. What do you want from us?" Vexia asked, her voice a whisper of pure awe. Admiral Rostova's calm expression finally softened, replaced by a look of profound, weary sadness. "We want what you want, xenologist Vexia. We want to not be alone. But we have learned through a long and painful history that power without wisdom is the shortest path to extinction. Before we can extend our hand, we must be sure the hand that meets it why. LL not be holding a weapon." Her image flickered and then vanished, replaced once more by the view of the silent, black ship, hanging motionless amidst the now cowed and humiliated Glyptal fleet. The message was clear. The first part of the lesson was over. The question was whether the Glyptal Imperium was capable of learning. The resonance chamber was no longer a place of harmonious order. It was a tomb of silent shock. The full report from Archon Kale and xenologist Vexia had been disseminated to the Praetor and his council, and the effect had been a shattering of their most fundamental assumptions about the universe and their place within it. The crimson light of Kale's carapace was gone, replaced by a dull, bruised purple. He stood hunched, a monument to broken pride. Vexia's emerald form was a whirlwind of frantic, brilliant light, a mind struggling to encompass a reality that had expanded beyond all conceivable horizons. Praetor Valerius, alone, remained a steady, deep sapphire, but his internal light seemed dimmer, as if contemplating a truth too vast to be illuminated. They had not been defeated in battle. They had been dismissed. Their greatest fleet, the pride of the Imperium, had been rendered as helpless as a child's toy by a power they could not even begin to comprehend. Not with violence, not with anger, but with a quiet, disappointed sigh that had bent the fabric of reality itself. The shame of it was a palpable force in the chamber, a resonance of humiliation that vibrated in the very crystal of the walls. "They wield the universe as a tool." Kale's voice was a low, fractured chime, stripped of all its former arrogance. "Our fleets are weapons. They are like sharpened sticks against a being that can command the storm. I saw it. I felt it. We are primitives." "No, Archon," Vexia corrected, her voice sharp with intellectual fervor. "We are not primitives. We are simply on a different path. We mastered the manipulation of energy and matter. We built an empire on the logic of force and counterforce. The humans, they have mastered the principles that lie beneath. They do not move pieces on the board. They have learned to reshape the board itself. It is not a matter of superiority, but of dimension. A dimension of power that renders ours meaningless," Kale countered. What is the purpose of a sword when your enemy can command the very atoms of the blade to fall apart? Praetor Valerius finally moved, his slow, deliberate motion drawing all attention. The purpose of a sword, Archon, is to be a sword. The failure was not in our technology, but in our philosophy. We assumed that all power must look like our own. We sent a fleet to ask a question, and when we did not receive the answer we expected, our first instinct was to strike. The human was right. Our actions contradicted our words. We failed their test. A holographic projector in the center of the chamber shimmered to life. The calm, unnerving face of Admiral Eva Rostova appeared before them once more, her image transmitted by the *solitude*, which still held its silent vigil in the heavens above. "Praetor Valerius," her voice filled the chamber, as clear and present as if she were standing among them. "We have observed your council's deliberations. Your capacity for self-reflection is encouraging." The bluntness of her statement, the casual admission that they had been spied upon in their most sacred space, would have once been cause for a declaration of war. Now it was met with a resigned silence. Of course they could listen. A species that could bend spacetime would find Gliptal privacy shields to be of little consequence. Valerius inclined his ancient head. "Admiral Rostova, you have demonstrated a power beyond our understanding. You have humbled an empire that has not known humility for 10,000 years. We ask again, what is it that you want?" Rostova's expression remained neutral, but her eyes seemed to soften with a deep, ancient sorrow. "For a very long time, we humans were alone on our world. When we finally reached for the stars, we were full of hope. We imagined a galaxy teeming with life, with ancient, wise civilizations that would welcome us. Instead, we found echoes, ruins. The silent tombs of empires that had risen and fallen long before our sun had even coalesced. We found evidence of 1,000 different species, all of whom had reached a certain point of technological advancement and then invariably annihilated themselves." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the chamber. "We found that the universe presents every intelligent species with the same great filter. It is not a technological barrier. It is a philosophical one. The moment a species gains the power to reshape their world, they are faced with a choice: to use that power for creation or for destruction, to master themselves or to master others. It seems almost without exception that they choose the latter, and their power consume." Them? The Praetor's sapphire light flickered. The Gliptal's own history was not without its dark ages, its own self-destructive conflicts, long since buried under millennia of enforced order. "Humanity almost failed this test," Rostova continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "We unleashed energies we could not control. We turned them upon ourselves. We very nearly scrubbed our world clean of all life, but we survived. At the edge of the abyss, we looked down and we chose to step back. We learned the most difficult lesson the universe has to teach. The greatest power is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to choose not to." Her gaze seemed to pass over each member of the council. "The solitude is the culmination of that lesson. It is not a weapon. We do not build weapons anymore. It is a vessel of observation, of understanding, and if absolutely necessary, of preservation. Its ability to manipulate spacetime is a shield, not a sword. A tool to de-escalate, to enforce a pause, to give a young, impulsive species a moment to reconsider an action they might regret for eternity." A profound understanding began to dawn in Vexia's mind. "Your silence," she projected, her emerald light glowing with revelation. "Your test, it wasn't about us, not entirely. You are looking for survivors, for other species who have passed the same filter." Rostova gave a small, sad smile. It was the first true emotion she had displayed, and it was devastating in its quiet grief. "Yes, we are looking for neighbors, for partners, for anyone else who has looked into the abyss of their own power and chosen to step back. We came here not to conquer, but with hope." The chamber was silent. The grand, cosmic narrative of Gliptal dominance, of their manifest destiny to bring order to the stars, collapsed in an instant. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They were children playing with fire, who had just been visited by an adult who had been burned long ago and had learned the wisdom of the flame. It was Praetor Valerius who broke the silence, his voice resonating with a new humility, a new gravity. "It seems," he said, his ancient gaze fixed on the human admiral, "that our immutable logic of the stars was incomplete. It was a philosophy of power, not of wisdom. We would be honored to learn from you." For the first time since their arrival, a true sense of peace settled over the Gliptal. The fear was gone, replaced by a sense of awe and a dawning, fragile hope. They had not met a conqueror. They had met a survivor, a teacher, an elder species not in age but in wisdom. An alliance was born in that moment, not of treaties and territories, but of a shared, sudden understanding of their place in the cosmos. As the formal discussions of cultural exchange began, a process that would take decades and reshape the very foundation of Gliptal society, Admiral Rostova remained. Her ship, the Solitude Asterisk, stayed in orbit of Xylos, no longer a symbol of dread, but a monument to a new kind of power. Weeks turned into months. Gliptal scholars and human scientists began a slow, careful dialogue. The Gliptal learned of human art, of their philosophies born from suffering and resilience, of their deep, almost spiritual reverence for the fragility of life. Humans, in turn, learned of the Gliptal's deep understanding of complex systems, of their crystalline biology, of a history that stretched back into the mists of galactic dawn. It was during one of these exchanges, deep within the data archives of the Asterisk Solitude Asterisk, that Vexia made a discovery that would once again change everything. She had been granted access to a portion of the human ship's sensor logs, specifically the data that had led them to the Xylos system in the first place. She had assumed it was a random survey, a methodical exploration. The truth was far more specific. Admiral, Vexia's holographic form appeared on the Asterisk Solitude Asterisk's quiet, minimalist bridge. Rostova stood alone, looking out at a star chart that depicted not just their galaxy but the local group of galaxies, a map of impossible scale. "I have been reviewing the long-range sensor data from your arrival. You were not simply exploring this sector, you were tracking something." Rostova turned from the map, her expression somber. She did not seem surprised. "Yes, Vexia." "We were. It is a signal," Vexia continued, her emerald light pulsing with analytical excitement and a touch of fear. "Faint, incredibly ancient, it seems to be a lament, a repeating mathematical pattern encoded in a carrier wave of exotic particles, a pattern that seems to predate the existence of our star, but it is not originating from within our galaxy." Rostova gestured to the vast star map. A single point of light far beyond the edge of their own galactic disk pulsed with a soft, red glow. "It comes from there, from the intergalactic void. We call it the orphan's cry. We have been tracking it for centuries, every time. We find the ruins of a civilization that failed the Great Filter. We find faint, residual traces of this same signal. It seems to be the last thing they ever heard." A cold dread, a concept Vexia was only just beginning to understand in its human context, settled in her mind. "You believe this signal is connected to the fall of these civilizations?" "We believe it is a warning," Rostova replied, her voice low and grave. "Or a beacon, or perhaps a symptom." She manipulated the star chart. Vast swathes of distant galaxies on the map turned dark. "We call this phenomenon the Great Silence. Entire galaxies over the course of cosmic time simply go dark. Their light fades. Their energy signatures vanish, as if they have been snuffed out. The orphan's cry always grows stronger in the regions bordering the silence." Vexia's mind raced back through the Gliptal's own ancient mythos, the deep archives that predated their logical empire from a time of superstition and fear. She remembered the legends of the Star Eaters, the cosmic shadow, a formless dread that came from the void to consume the light of creation. It had been dismissed as primitive fear, the stuff of creation myths, but the pattern was undeniable. "Our oldest legends speak of this," Vexia whispered. "A darkness that consumes stars. We thought it was allegory." "It is not allegory," Rostova said, her voice heavy with the weight of a terrible certainty. "Something is moving between the galaxies, something ancient and vast and hungry. It is the reason for the Great Filter. It is not just an internal test of a species' wisdom. It is also a race to mature, to unify, to become strong enough in wisdom and power to face what is coming." The truth crashed down upon Vexia, upon the Gliptal Imperium, upon them all. Humanity's quest was not born of loneliness. It was born of a desperate, urgent need for allies. The solitude was not just a symbol of their philosophy. It was a tool, a scout, a sentinel sent out into the terrifying dark to find anyone else, anyone at all, who might be strong enough to stand with them against the encroaching night. Their arrival in the Xylos system had not been a first contact. It had been a recruitment. On the bridge of the Asterisk Solitude Asterisk, the human and the Gliptal stood together, two species from opposite ends of the biological and philosophical spectrum, united by a shared, dawning horror. They looked at the great map, at the small, brightly lit spiral of their home galaxy, and then at the vast, creeping darkness that lay beyond. The single, powerful warship had not come to fight a fleet. It had come because it was preparing for a war against the silence itself, a war for the right of any light in the universe to continue to shine. And they were no longer alone. Their vigil and their fight had just begun.